It was an ordinary morning at Riverwood High, and Jasmine Carter, a quiet but determined 16-year-old, was preparing for yet another day of school. She adjusted the strap of her backpack and took a deep breath before stepping into the bustling hallways where the chatter of students filled the air. Jasmine had always preferred the safety of her books to the chaos of social interactions, and today was no different. Jasmine's life hadn't been easy. As one of the few black students in a predominantly white school, she often felt like an outsider. Despite her achievements, honor roll, extracurricular involvement, and her talent in science, she couldn't escape the whispers that followed her through the halls. People assumed things about her because of her skin color, things that weren't true, and she learned early on that standing out too much wasn't a good idea. But today, Jasmine hoped to keep her head down and get through the day unscathed. She had a test in history, and she had stayed up late studying for it. She didn't want anything to distract her. She wasn't looking for trouble, but, unfortunately, trouble found her anyway. As Jasmine walked past the lockers, she felt a shove from behind. Tyler Moore, the school's biggest bully, and his group of friends stood there, smirking. Tyler had been taunting Jasmine for months now, making hurtful comments about her appearance and her background. It was all part of his daily routine, targeting someone weaker, someone different, to boost his own ego. "Watch where you're going, freak," Tyler sneered, his friends laughing behind him. Jasmine didn't respond. She had learned long ago that arguing with Tyler only made things worse, but today, something was different. Maybe it was the stress of the test. Maybe it was the exhaustion from constantly fighting for her place. But when Tyler shoved her again, Jasmine felt something snap inside her. "Why don't you just leave me alone?" she said quietly, though her voice trembled. Tyler grinned, his eyes narrowing. "Oh, what's the matter, freak? You got a problem with me?" He shoved her again, this time harder. Jasmine's books scattered across the floor, and a wave of humiliation crashed over her. The hallway was filled with laughter from Tyler's friends, but it wasn't funny to Jasmine. Her face burned with shame, and she tried to collect her things, her hands shaking. As she bent down to pick up the last of her books, Tyler's voice echoed again. "You don't belong here, Carter. Maybe you should just leave." Jasmine stood up, her heart pounding. For the first time, she didn't try to walk away or hide. She met his gaze. "I do belong here," she said, her voice steadier now. "And you can't make me feel any less than that." But just as Tyler opened his mouth to respond, there was a new voice in the hallway, one that wasn't afraid to speak up. Jasmine turned her head, and there, standing tall and strong, was her father, Michael Carter. Jasmine's eyes widened. Her father's presence was unmistakable. With his stature, confidence, and calm demeanor, Michael Carter was a man who commanded respect. He wasn't just any father. He was a former Special Forces operative and a well-known lawyer. Jasmine knew that with him here, things were about to change. The hallway went silent. The silence in the hallway was palpable as Michael Carter stepped forward, his gaze fixed firmly on Tyler Moore. For a moment, no one moved. Tyler, frozen in shock, seemed unsure of how to react. He was used to pushing people around, to being the one who called the shots. But something about the intensity in Michael's eyes made him hesitate. Jasmine stood to the side, still trying to collect herself. Her hands were shaking slightly from the confrontation, but she couldn't deny the relief she felt seeing her father there. Tyler was always quick to intimidate her, but now she wasn't alone. Michael's voice, calm yet commanding, cut through the tension. "Tyler, I suggest you step away from my daughter." Tyler straightened up, trying to muster some of the bravado he was known for, but it faltered when he saw the determination in Michael's eyes. His friends, who had been snickering moments earlier, fell silent. They, too, seemed to sense that this situation was different. This wasn't a fight that would be easily won. "I don't know who you think you are," Tyler said, his voice wavering slightly. "But you don't get to come in here and tell me what to do." Michael didn't flinch. "I'm the man who's going to make sure you never lay a hand on my daughter again," he replied, his voice low and unwavering. Tyler scoffed, his confidence returning slightly. "She's just a freak, always walking around like she's better than everyone. You're overreacting." Jasmine winced at his words, but she stood tall, trying to steady herself. This wasn't just about defending her in that moment. It was about showing Tyler that she wouldn't be intimidated anymore. Her father, sensing her resolve, took another step forward. "No, Tyler," Michael said, his voice calm but filled with authority. "You've crossed the line. My daughter is not a freak. She's stronger than you'll ever be. And I won't stand by and let you bully her or anyone else. Not here, not ever." Tyler's face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and anger. His friends remained silent, unsure of what to do next. The hallway had transformed from a place of ridicule to one of silence, and the power dynamics had shifted in an instant. Michael's gaze remained fixed on Tyler, unwavering. "If you ever put your hands on her again," he said slowly, "there will be consequences, understand?" Tyler didn't answer immediately. His defiance was gone, replaced by a subtle fear that lingered in his eyes. He glanced at his friends, but no one was willing to back him up this time. The tension was too much. "I don't need to tell you twice," Michael added, his voice still calm but with an edge that sent a clear message. "Get out of my daughter's way." For a moment Tyler just stood there, his face contorted in frustration. Then without another word he turned on his heel and walked off, his friends trailing behind him, awkwardly glancing at Michael as they passed. The silence lingered for a few seconds, and then the crowd that had been watching the entire exchange began to murmur. It was like the tension that had built up in the hallway was finally being released, and everyone seemed eager to talk about what had just happened. But Jasmine didn't care about the whispers. She only cared about the man who stood in front of her, looking at her with unwavering support. "Are you okay?" Michael asked gently, stepping toward her. Jasmine nodded, feeling both a wave of relief and a rush of emotion. She'd never imagined her father would step in like this, but now that he had, she realized how much strength it gave her. She didn't have to face this alone anymore. "I'm fine now, Dad," she said, her voice steady, though her heart was still racing. Michael placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression softening. "I'll always have your back, Jasmine. Don't let anyone make you feel less than you are." Jasmine felt a surge of gratitude. She'd always known her father was a man of strength, but in this moment, his protection meant more to her than anything. She wasn't just his daughter, she was his priority, and he would do anything to ensure that she was never made to feel inferior again. As she walked beside him down the hallway, she felt something inside her shift. The power that had once seemed so far out of reach was now hers. Tyler Moore had picked the wrong person to bully, and she knew that from that moment on, she wouldn't allow anyone to treat her as less than what she was. The lesson was clear. With her father by her side, Jasmine was stronger than any bully, and this was only the beginning. Tyler Moore stormed down the hallway, his steps heavy and filled with frustration. The sting of his own humiliation refused to fade. It wasn't just the slap from Michael Carter that burned, though that had certainly shaken him. It was the fact that, for once, he had been put in his place, and he couldn't shake the feeling of being powerless. In the minutes after the incident, Tyler had hoped to just disappear. He wasn't used to being the one humiliated. He had always been the one who made others feel small, and now he was the one who had to walk away with his tail between his legs. It was a feeling he wasn't accustomed to, and it unsettled him more than he cared to admit. As Tyler reached the school parking lot, he leaned against his car, trying to clear his mind. The anger, the frustration, the embarrassment, they all collided inside him. He had always been the bully, the one who enjoyed watching others squirm. But now, after everything that had happened, he wasn't sure who he was anymore. The cocky bravado that had once defined him felt fragile, as though it could shatter at any moment. He tried to rationalize what had happened. He hadn't meant to escalate things with Jasmine. He had just been trying to assert himself, as he always did. But now, as he thought back on the way his words and actions had affected her, he realized how wrong he had been. Jasmine wasn't just another target for his twisted sense of power. She was a person who didn't deserve the cruelty he had directed at her. And then there was her father. Michael Carter was a man of authority, someone who didn't need to speak loudly to be heard. His actions had been clear and deliberate. It wasn't just a slap that had knocked Tyler down. It was the certainty in Michael's voice, the force in his presence that reminded Tyler of the consequences of his actions. Sitting in the silence of the parking lot, Tyler began to understand something he had never truly grasped before. The consequences of bullying weren't just about the victim. They were about him, too. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized that he didn't like the person he had become. His behavior had caused pain, and he needed to do something about it. Tyler's phone buzzed, breaking his thoughts. It was a message from his friend, Jake. Tyler hesitated for a moment before reading it. The words were simple. "You good, bro? Heard about your run-in with the Carters. What happened?" Tyler's hands trembled slightly as he typed a response. He couldn't hide the truth anymore. "Yeah, I messed up. I shouldn't have done it. Her dad, he's not someone you mess with." He hit send, staring at the screen as the message left his phone. The weight of the conversation lingered, and for the first time in a long while, Tyler felt a shift inside him. He wasn't sure what the next step was, but he knew he had to make it right. He had hurt someone, and it was time to face the consequences, no matter how uncomfortable that might be. The next day at school, Tyler's nerves were on edge. He had spent the entire night thinking about his actions, about the way he had treated Jasmine and the way he had been so quick to resort to bullying. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how wrong he had been. It wasn't just the slap that made him regret his actions. It was the realization that he had crossed a line, and now he had to make it right. He couldn't just ignore it. The weight of the guilt was too much to bear. So, with a sense of resolve, he decided to take the first step. He had to apologize. But how could he approach Jasmine after everything that had happened? How could he undo the damage he had caused? Tyler spent most of the morning planning what he would say. He knew it had to be more than just a quick "I'm sorry." He needed to show that he understood the impact of his actions. But as the bell rang and he walked into the hallway, his nerves took over. The thought of facing Jasmine made his stomach churn. When he finally spotted her at her locker, Tyler's heart raced. Jasmine looked at him, her eyes guarded but not hostile. She didn't look angry, but there was something in her expression that made Tyler feel like he was standing in front of a wall he couldn't break through. He took a deep breath and approached her, trying to steady his nerves. There was no going back now. The moment he had been dreading had arrived. Jasmine didn't flinch as he stopped in front of her. Her gaze was steady, and for a brief moment, Tyler felt exposed. He had been the one to make her feel small, but now it was his turn to feel vulnerable. Without any words exchanged, Tyler reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, sending a quick message to his friend Jake. "I messed up. I need to fix this." But this time, it wasn't about saving face. It was about taking responsibility. Tyler had to own up to what he had done. He stood there in front of Jasmine, his head held a little lower than usual, but his resolve was stronger than it had ever been. She didn't have to forgive him, but he had to say the words. He had to apologize. Jasmine didn't react immediately. She simply watched him, her expression unreadable. Tyler's heart pounded in his chest as he waited, unsure of what she was thinking. But he didn't look away. He couldn't. The silence between Tyler and Jasmine hung in the air like a heavy curtain, making every second feel stretched. Tyler's pulse raced and he swallowed hard, waiting for her response. For the first time in a long time, he felt completely exposed. There was no way out now. He had come this far, and he had to finish what he had started. Jasmine, standing in front of her locker, continued to observe Tyler carefully, her eyes searching his face for something. It wasn't anger she saw, but something else, something closer to vulnerability. Tyler had never allowed himself to be vulnerable, not with anyone, and now, standing in front of the girl he had tormented for months, he had no choice but to face his mistakes. "I know you've been bullying me," Jasmine said quietly, breaking the silence, "and I know you've hurt me and others with your words, but I've never seen you like this before." Tyler felt a slight pang of guilt. Was it really possible that she was seeing a side of him that even he didn't fully recognize? Was there a chance he could change? Jasmine sighed, her voice soft but firm. "I don't know if I can forgive you right now, Tyler, but I appreciate you coming to me with an apology. It means something. But this isn't just about saying sorry, it's about proving it." Tyler nodded. He knew she was right. Apologizing was the first step, but his actions would speak louder than any words ever could. He could tell by the way she was looking at him that she wasn't convinced just yet. "I get that," he replied, "and I'm not asking for forgiveness, Jasmine. I'm just asking for the chance to make things right." There was a pause before Jasmine spoke again. "I'll be watching, Tyler. You have a lot to prove." Tyler didn't flinch. He had spent too long running away from the consequences of his actions. Now was his chance to start over, to be better. He wasn't expecting instant forgiveness, but he knew he couldn't let this opportunity slip away. "I understand," he said, meeting her gaze with newfound resolve. "And I'll prove it." As Jasmine walked away, leaving Tyler standing there, he felt a sense of clarity. The path ahead was long, but it was worth it. The apology was only the beginning, and the real work would come in the days to follow. The next few days at Riverwood High were tense for Tyler. He had said his piece to Jasmine, and now he had to follow through. He couldn't just go back to his old ways. The entire school knew about the incident in the hallway, and rumors had spread faster than wildfire. Some students were talking about how the bully had been humbled, and others whispered about Jasmine's father, Michael Carter, the man who had stepped in when Tyler thought he could get away with it. But it wasn't just the students who were watching. Tyler could feel the weight of the teachers and staff's eyes on him as well. He knew that, in their minds, he had to prove he wasn't the same person who had bullied Jasmine, that he had changed. But change wasn't easy, especially when the old habits still lingered. Tyler's first test came when he walked into his next class, history with Mr. Simmons. As he entered the room, he saw Jasmine sitting at her usual seat near the front. She didn't look at him. In fact, she barely acknowledged his presence, which stung more than Tyler had anticipated. He had hoped that by now she would have softened, but instead she seemed distant, even cold. Tyler took a seat at the back of the classroom, trying not to look at her. The space between them felt so vast, even though they were only a few feet apart. He could feel the weight of her silence pressing down on him. The guilt gnawed at him. Had his apology been enough, or had it fallen on deaf ears? The bell rang, and Mr. Simmons began the class. But Tyler couldn't focus. His mind kept wandering back to the conversation with Jasmine. He knew he had to do more than just apologize. He had to prove that he was worthy of a second chance. But how? During class, Mr. Simmons assigned a group project, and Tyler was paired with Jasmine. The moment the announcement was made, Tyler's heart skipped a beat. This was his chance to show her he was serious about making things right. But the tension between them was palpable. Jasmine didn't even glance in his direction as they moved to work on the project together. As they sat down at a table, Tyler fidgeted with his notebook. Jasmine was focused on her work, scribbling down notes without saying a word. The silence between them was almost unbearable. Tyler wanted to say something, anything to break the ice, but he wasn't sure how. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jasmine looked up, her expression still guarded. "If we're going to work together, we need to focus," she said flatly. "No distractions." Tyler nodded, swallowing his nerves. This was it. He couldn't mess this up. "I know I've done a lot of things wrong," Tyler said quietly, "but I'm trying to do better. I'm not asking you to forgive me right now, but I hope we can at least get through this project." Jasmine didn't respond immediately. She just stared at him for a moment, her eyes unreadable. Then, with a small nod, she went back to her notes. Tyler felt a sense of relief. At least she hadn't shut him down completely. But he knew this was only the beginning. Earning Jasmine's trust wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight. But for the first time in a long while, he was willing to put in the effort, and that was a start. The days following the awkward but honest interaction between Tyler and Jasmine were filled with quiet tension. It wasn't that they avoided each other entirely. It was more that their interactions felt forced, like two people trying to learn how to coexist after a long history of conflict. The group project they had been assigned was coming along slowly, but Tyler wasn't focused on the assignment. He was focused on Jasmine, the girl he had wronged, the girl who was still distant and guarded, and the girl who had, in her own way, already shown him more grace than he deserved. Tyler wasn't used to being vulnerable, especially with someone like Jasmine. He had been the bully for so long that it had become a part of him, a shield he used to protect himself from feeling anything that could show him how much he was lacking. But now, with Jasmine, that shield had crumbled. It wasn't just about the apology anymore. It was about proving day by day that he could change. One afternoon, as they sat together in the library working on their project, Tyler decided to take a chance. He didn't know if it would work or if Jasmine would even listen, but he had to try. The silence between them was heavy, but he couldn't stand it any longer. "I know this project isn't the most exciting thing," Tyler began, his voice tentative but steady, "but I want to make sure we both get the best grade we can, and I promise I'm not going to mess this up like I did with, well, everything else." Jasmine looked up from her notes, her eyes narrowing slightly as she regarded him. Tyler didn't expect an immediate response, but he hoped his words would break through the walls she had built. She had every right to remain distant. He had earned that distance through his actions, but he had to start somewhere. "You've been trying," Jasmine said after a moment, her voice soft but clear. "I can see that. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, but I'm willing to get through this project with you. But don't expect anything more than that right now." Tyler nodded, feeling a small sense of relief. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a step forward. The fact that she was willing to work with him was more than he could have asked for. Over the next few weeks, Tyler made a conscious effort to change. He participated in class discussions, treated everyone with more respect, and focused on improving himself. Jasmine, still wary, didn't acknowledge his efforts much, but Tyler noticed the small changes, the way she didn't flinch when he spoke to her, the way she didn't shut him down immediately when he offered help with their project. One day after school, as the two of them walked to their respective buses, Tyler felt the urge to speak again. He wasn't sure if it was the right moment, but it had been on his mind for weeks now. "Jasmine, I know it's not enough, but I want to keep trying," he said quietly, his words uncertain but sincere. "I want to show you that I'm not the person I was before. I know I've hurt you and I can't change the past, but I can make sure I never hurt you again." Jasmine stopped walking for a moment, her expression unreadable. Tyler held his breath, waiting for her response. "I'm not ready to trust you completely yet, Tyler," she said, her voice calm. "But I've seen you try. That's something. Don't let me down again, all right?" Tyler nodded, a sense of determination rising within him. He didn't know if Jasmine would ever completely forgive him, but he knew he couldn't give up. He had hurt her deeply, but he was willing to put in the work to show her that he could be better. As they parted ways, Tyler felt a strange sense of hope, for the first time in a long while. He wasn't sure how much time it would take, or how many mistakes he would still make along the way. But one thing was clear: this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of a new chapter, one where he could earn back the respect he had lost, one step at a time. The weeks that followed the tense but quiet conversation between Tyler and Jasmine were a testament to the slow but steady work of rebuilding what had been broken. The project they had been working on was finished, and while the grade was important, it wasn't what Tyler focused on. What mattered more was the way their relationship, though still fragile, had begun to shift. He could tell that Jasmine was still cautious, still holding back a part of herself from him, but she wasn't shutting him out anymore. That, in itself, felt like a victory. Tyler's classmates, however, weren't as forgiving. The whispers behind his back had not gone away, and the reputation he had built as the school's bully lingered, even though he had changed. No one was going to let him forget who he had been. Not right away. Tyler had always been used to the attention, the laughter at his jokes, the respect he commanded through fear and dominance. But now he wasn't getting the same reactions. He had become a different person, but the world around him wasn't ready for that transformation. In class, he continued to speak up, offering answers to questions and participating in discussions. But it wasn't easy. Every time someone looked at him, he wondered what they were thinking. Were they remembering who he used to be, or were they seeing the person he was trying to become? One afternoon, during lunch, Tyler sat alone at the back of the cafeteria, absent-mindedly pushing his food around. The usual group of friends wasn't there, and the silence was unsettling. He had grown used to the noise and the laughter, the feeling of being in control of his space. But now he felt like an outsider in his own school. Jasmine, on the other hand, had started to make new connections. She wasn't the shy, quiet girl she had once been, but instead someone who had found a new confidence, someone who had realized her own worth. Tyler's thoughts were interrupted when Jasmine walked in, flanked by a couple of her friends. She spotted him sitting alone and, without hesitation, walked over. Tyler's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected her to approach him in a space like this in front of so many people. "Mind if I sit here?" Jasmine asked, her voice steady but with a hint of curiosity. Tyler looked up, his surprise evident, but he quickly recovered and nodded. "Of course." Jasmine set her tray down and sat across from him, her friends not far behind. For a moment, Tyler felt the eyes of the entire cafeteria on him, but instead of the judgment he expected, there was nothing but quiet curiosity. Maybe it was because Jasmine had sat with him. Maybe it was because people were starting to realize that Tyler wasn't the same person he had been. Either way, the shift in the air was palpable. "So," Jasmine said, taking a bite of her lunch, "how's the project grade?" "Good," Tyler said, feeling a sense of accomplishment. "We did well, but honestly, the grade doesn't matter much to me." Jasmine raised an eyebrow, intrigued by his response. "Really? I thought you'd care about that kind of thing." Tyler smiled weakly. "I used to care about grades and about being the best, about proving I was better than everyone else, but now I just want to do better. Not for anyone else, but for me." Jasmine nodded thoughtfully, her gaze softening. "That's a start. But you can't just expect things to change overnight. People are going to remember who you were for a while. You've got to show them that you're different, not just say it." "I know," Tyler admitted, his voice quieter now. I'm not asking anyone to forgive me right away, but I'm willing to put in the work." Jasmine studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Well, I've seen you try. That's more than most people do. Just keep it up." For the first time, Tyler felt like he was finally earning something more valuable than respect. He was earning trust, and that meant more than any of the fleeting power he had once held over his classmates. As lunch continued, Tyler and Jasmine spoke more freely than they had before, and the conversation flowed easily between them. There was still a distance between them, but it wasn't the same kind of distance that had once separated them. It was a gap that could be bridged one step at a time. By the end of the lunch period, Jasmine stood up to leave, but before she walked away, she gave Tyler a small, almost imperceptible smile. "I'm glad we could talk. Keep proving people wrong, Tyler. You've got more in you than they think." Tyler watched her walk away, feeling a sense of hope for the first time in a long while. The journey was far from over, and there were still many steps ahead of him, but he was no longer facing it alone. As the weeks passed, Tyler found himself wrestling with the transformation he had embarked on. The bullying days were behind him, but they weren't easily forgotten. The whispers in the halls, the sideways glances from former friends, and the taunts of some of his classmates still followed him, like an invisible chain that he couldn't shake off. But instead of retreating into his old behavior, Tyler had done the unthinkable. He chose to stand tall. Every time someone looked at him with skepticism, he reminded himself of the work he was doing to prove himself. Every time he felt the urge to revert to his old ways, to make someone else feel small so he could regain a semblance of control, he held back. He knew the only way forward was through genuine change, not through pretending to be someone he wasn't. The true test came one afternoon after school. Tyler was sitting in the library working on a math assignment when he overheard a group of students talking about Jasmine. They were laughing and whispering about her, and Tyler recognized the familiar tone in their voices. It was the same tone he had used for months, mocking, belittling, dismissive. He could hear the name-calling, the trivial jabs at her appearance and background. The insults, once aimed at him, were now aimed at her, and Tyler felt a surge of anger that was unlike anything he had experienced in weeks. His fists clenched. His mind raced with the impulse to defend her, to step in and make the people around him realize how wrong they were. But this time he didn't act impulsively. He didn't lash out. He didn't do what the old Tyler would have done, make a joke at someone else's expense or try to prove himself through dominance. Instead, Tyler took a deep breath, stood up, and walked over to the group. "Is this really necessary?" he asked quietly, his voice steady but filled with authority. The group of students looked up, startled. Tyler had never approached them like this before. "Do you really need to talk about her like that?" The students were caught off guard. One of them, the leader of the group, scoffed. "What, are you going to defend her now, Moore? You've changed, huh?" Tyler stood firm, his posture straightening. "Yeah, I have. And I don't appreciate hearing people talk like that about Jasmine or anyone else." There was an awkward silence before another student, unsure of how to react, mumbled, "Well, maybe we were just joking around." Tyler wasn't convinced. "It's not funny. It never was, and it never will be. So if you're going to keep talking about her like that, then maybe you should find somewhere else to hang out." He didn't shout, didn't make a scene. He just stood there, unwavering, and waited for them to absorb his words. The students exchanged uneasy glances, but none of them spoke up. Eventually, the group broke up, their whispers fading as they walked away. Tyler, for the first time in a long while, felt the weight of their judgment lift off his shoulders. When he turned to walk back to his seat, he found Jasmine standing by the doorway watching him. She had been there the entire time, but Tyler hadn't noticed until now. He had stood up for her, but he hadn't known she was there to see it. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice sincere. "You didn't have to do that." Tyler looked at her, his heart pounding with a mix of relief and something else, something deeper. "I did. I couldn't just sit by and let them do that again." Jasmine smiled, the warmth of her expression catching Tyler off guard. "You've come a long way, Tyler. I'm proud of you." Those words hit Tyler harder than anything else. Proud of him. It wasn't just forgiveness she was offering, it was acknowledgement. And it was all he needed to hear. He wasn't the same person he had been when he first started this journey. And though the road ahead was still long, he was no longer walking it alone. As Jasmine left the library, Tyler stood there for a moment, reflecting on the power of that simple exchange. The boy who had once been the school bully was finally finding redemption, not through grand gestures or words, but through his actions. The path wasn't easy, and it would take time, but it was a path worth walking. The final bell of the school day rang, and Tyler Moore sat in the quiet aftermath of the classroom, his mind a whirl of thoughts. The shift that had begun in him weeks ago had finally culminated in something he hadn't expected. Peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from being left alone or getting by unnoticed. No, this was different. This was the kind of peace that came from knowing he had changed, that he was becoming someone better, not for anyone else, but for himself. He thought back to the day when he had first faced Jasmine's father, Michael Carter, the slap, the warning, the undeniable shift in his sense of self. And then there had been the small but powerful acts of courage since then, standing up for Jasmine, confronting his classmates, taking responsibility for his past. Each moment had chipped away at the walls he had built around himself. Tyler wasn't under any illusions. He knew the road to redemption was a long one, but he had begun walking it. He had already started to face the consequences of his actions, but now, for the first time in his life, those consequences didn't feel like something to run from. They felt like opportunities to grow. The hallway was empty save for the students filing out of the school. Tyler glanced out the window where the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Jasmine's words from earlier that day echoed in his mind. "I'm proud of you." He had never expected to hear those words from her. It felt like something had clicked between them, something that was more than just forgiveness. It was mutual respect, hard-earned and genuine. But Tyler knew this wasn't the end. He wasn't going to be able to just coast along. He had a lot of work ahead of him, proving to Jasmine, to his classmates, and to himself that he was a different person. The bully was gone, and in his place was a young man who was learning day by day how to be better. Later that evening after dinner, Tyler sat alone in his room, reflecting on the journey he had been on. It was a strange feeling looking back at all the things he had done, all the people he had hurt, and realizing how much power had been within him all along. Not the power to put others down, but the power to lift them up. Tyler's phone buzzed. It was a message from Jasmine. "Jasmine, hey, I just wanted to say thanks for today. I think you really did change. I know it's not perfect yet, but you're getting there." Tyler smiled, his fingers hovering over the screen as he thought about how best to respond. The words came to him easily. "Tyler, I'm still working on it, but I'm getting there. Thank you for giving me a chance." The reply came almost immediately. "Jasmine, you deserve that chance. Just keep proving it." Tyler set the phone down and leaned back in his chair, a sense of calm settling over him. He didn't need to be perfect. He just needed to keep trying, to keep making the right choices. He could already feel the weight lifting off him, not just from the apology he had offered, but from the knowledge that he was no longer the person he used to be. He wasn't sure where this road would lead, but he knew one thing for certain. He was no longer walking it alone.